There you go. All right, we're set.
Yes, my name is Dr. Sharnael, Wolverton-Sehon with Swiftfire. Super excited to have Robert Steele here with us today. Please give us a little bit of background. We've had a little technical stuff, but let's get this going.
Sure, let's plug ahead. All right, so born in New York, lived overseas for 18 years as the son of an oil man, including 4 years in Vietnam as a child, 63 to 67. Came back and did an undergraduate focusing on multinational corporations and home host country issues. Then I was rewarded with a fellowship at Lehigh University, and I did a thesis on predicting revolution. All of the preconditions of revolution exist today in the United States of America. And folks can find that chart by going to phi-beta-iota.net and looking up preconditions of revolution. I joined the Marine Corps because I felt I had become too intellectual and I was not enthusiastic about working for Lloyds Bank International, which did offer me a job. And the Marine Corps had the desired effect, but it was boring in peacetime. So I was very, very lucky to be accepted by the CIA as a clandestine case officer. And I'm told that it's 25,000 applied and 65 were accepted. And they put us through a 6-month training program. And then very uniquely for the Marine Corps, for the CIA, I got 3 back-to-back tours overseas, one of them in a combat zone. And it was a good experience. I came back and I had experience with counterintelligence worldwide, with artificial intelligence. They built the artificial intelligence staff around me. And then I went over and served as one of the DCI's action officers, the Director of Central Intelligence Action Officers in the Advanced Programs and Evaluations Group, which is how the DCI managed the NSA and the other, and the NRO, the satellites, the technical collection, and so forth. The Marine Corps asked me to leave the CIA and create the Marine Corps Intelligence Activity, and I did that. I helped write the Marine Corps Master Intelligence Plan as well, because I'd been in the Marine Corps Reserve all this time, and so they liked having a Marine who was also a qualified spy and all sorts intelligence professional. And that's when I discovered that the spy services don't know very much about anything. They basically have very narrow focuses on the Soviet Union, China, Cuba of all places, and they also are spending too much time and money creating mayhem, doing covert operations, assassinating people with drones, torturing people. This is not what I signed up for. What I discovered was that you can get 90% or more of what you need from open sources of information. Now, this is not favored by the intelligence community because it's not risky and it's not expensive and you can't pretend to be a super spy. But in fact, it's the bread and butter of what's called decision support, which is what intelligence should be all about. So I've been in a fight with the CIA for the last 30 years, and I'm hoping I will win this fight in President Trump's second term. General Mike Flynn is one of the greatest American patriots and heroes, and he understands open source. And the reason he was framed by the FBI was because he was about to do an audit and purge the intelligence community and create probably an open source agency. Wow. So we'll see. I'm certainly voting for Trump regardless of whether he listens to me or not. But I know that an open source agency would allow the president to not only create an educated public and a Congress that makes evidence-based decisions, it would also allow him to boost America up using open source everything engineering, which is something I'm uniquely qualified. I've written 2 books on it. And I am the champion for open source everything engineering, which has 9 major categories and 27 subdivisions, which would allow farming and the water, desalination, everything to be done for under 20% of what it costs now.
Wow. Wow. So tell us a little bit about, what do you think about how the debate went?
On the one hand, the debate was an embarrassing spectacle. On the other hand, it was clearly won by President Trump, and it was also clearly President Trump against Chris Wallace in collusion with Joe Biden. I mean, he basically did a Donna Brazil, and so Wallace was working for the Democrats during this debate. I've also noticed with interest the various things that appear to show that Joe Biden was wired up. There's even people talking about whether he was a body double. And it wasn't the real Joe Biden. I've seen side-by-side comparison pictures of the ears and the chins. I don't know myself. What I feel in my heart is that Trump is about faith, family, and freedom.
Yes.
And he is eventually going to destroy the Republican Party as well as the Democratic Party. And that makes me very happy because I think the Republican Party right now is betraying the president by not reaching out to independents, libertarians, and Sandinistas, who are populists. They're not communists. They're just populists, just like Trump's base, but with the left of center view rather than a right of center view. So on balance, I think we're headed in the right direction, and all of the ugliness that we're seeing is a preview of what the movie would be if we were stupid enough to allow the election to be stolen.
Yes, and you have an entire book that you've just written, Unrigged or Unrigged, and you go through several points, and you even have a breakup of the percentage of who's Democrat, who's Republican, what's left for grabs. Can you go into a little bit about that?
I'd be glad to, and let me say, I just put this up free online at phi-beta-iota.net. If people click on the Trump Revolution series, they'll see it right there. What's important, and I'll just flash it, but what's important here is that the Democrats control 17% of the voters, the Republicans control 13% of the voters. Then you have another 20% that are libertarian independents, and they're active in the system, but without effect. You have 50% of the voters that are not voting at all. They've given up on the rigged system. And in fact, I was very pleased. I'm a real fan of Kennedy's on Fox. She's one of 3 or 4 people on Fox that are worthwhile. Tucker Carlson is another, Judge Napolitano. Kennedy said on Fox the other day, the debate is what you get when you only have 2 parties. And they're controlling the debate. Now, let me point out that the League of Women Voters used to run the presidential debates, and they had the temerity to not provide the questions in advance and to invite 3rd, 4th, and 5th parties to the presidential debate. The debates were stolen from the League of Women Voters by the Republican and Democratic leadership in cahoots in order to exclude 3rd parties. Ross Perot could have won if his ego had not been so out of control, and also he was threatened, and his daughter was threatened with assassination. So for me, the debate doesn't matter. The election is not going to be stolen. I think the president has figured out how to make sure we have a fair election. And as best I can tell, the Democrats, there's so much dirt on the Democrats that we're now starting to bring out from NSA. We've got it all. We've got Hillary Clinton's pedophilia stuff. We've got the treason by Chuck Schumer. We've got Nancy Pelosi on multiple counts of fraud. I mean, these people are all jailable, okay? So I think it's going to turn out okay. My faith is in the president. I'm trusting the plan. And yes, I do love QAnon.
Yes, awesome. Well, the thing that we talked about earlier too is about how do we get to that point where all of these arrests finally happen and this is all out, and even convincing the people that there's a real arrest happening, because it seems like if it's not on a certain network, then it's a conspiracy theory. So what do you do with that?
I honestly don't know. I mean, one thing I've realized is I might be very, very good at open source intelligence and stuff like this, but what Trump is doing is superhuman. I don't think I could have survived all of the pressures, the Russian witch hunt, the impeachment, the lies. This is just amazing that he's being successful in the face of all of this. My sense is he's got the timing down. You know, there's that old joke about the guy that charged $5,000 for tapping a machine with a hammer. And they asked him to invoice, and he said, well, it's knowing where to tap. So I think Trump's sense of timing is something no one can second guess. And I just wish him well, because I think America's at a turning point between faith, family, and freedom on the one hand, and Sodom and Gomorrah and legalized pedophilia and all of this other stuff on the other hand.
Yeah, there's definitely a divine opportunity here to go one way or another and change the entire timeline. Going back to the ballots and the election, actually voting, what do you foresee as far as actually having a real true election without all this harvesting of ballots and mail-in fraud? And
I have no direct knowledge about the so-called quantum voting system, just like the quantum financial system that is allegedly being rolled out during the month of October. I have no direct knowledge. It's entirely possible to very quickly set it so that everybody votes by phone. It's also entirely possible to stop the electronic ballot fraud. Bill Binney has figured out how to do that with a little Y device that records the federal vote on a separate federal machine, and you also have exit polls. Now, I personally, and Cynthia McKinney and I both recommend paper ballots counted publicly on site, but it may be too late for that. I don't know. Certainly anything is possible. I think the president has figured out how to stop the fraud, and everything he's been doing up to this point has been to make people aware of the problem.
Yeah, and making people aware, not just in this avenue, but all kinds of avenues, goes back to the whole media situation that we're in. And you had mentioned when we were talking earlier about Laurel Canyon and this book that you're reading, and explain to people about the CIA Hollywood Mockingbird connection, because I can say it all day long, but coming from you.
I'm glad to do that, but let me emphasize that when I talk about this stuff, it's not based on my experience at CIA, which was relatively clean.
Okay.
It's based on me being a nonfiction reviewer. I've posted reviews. I've posted over 2,000 reviews of nonfiction books in 98 categories. And what you see behind me is a tiny fraction. I used to have an entire townhouse full of books. And when I briefly joined the United Nations to go serve on the Corruption Commission in Guatemala, I gave my library to George Mason University. And I'm still obscenely proud of the fact that it took 3 specialist librarians to evaluate my 5,000 volume library, which is now gone. Bottom line is that we made a deal with the Nazis to end World War II. And the Nazis, in addition to getting exfiltration to northern Argentina, they were given the CIA and the National Aeronautics and Space Administration. And I'm much taken with a book by Kathy O'Brien called Transformation of America. And people can read my summary of that book. I've reviewed a number of other books on mind control and so forth. And so all of my knowledge is based on books. Now, the 2 that I particularly recommend are one by Daniel Estulin on Tavistock, which is how the British have been controlling the United States through covert methods. In fact, there's some who say we didn't win the War of Independence. Freemasons on the British side and Freemasons on the American side kind of cooked this up so we would become a covert British colony. And I'm hoping President Trump is in the process of changing that. So I would encourage people to read my review of Tavistock and also read my review of Weird Scenes at Laurel Canyon. And for my subscribers for the Steele Report, I've actually got the original articles that went into making the book with all of the graphics in our privileged private document section. Because when the book was published, for some reason, they decided not to publish all the pictures and graphics. So I've got those behind my steelereport.com. But bottom line here is mind control is now out in the private sector. It's not just something that spies do. And it was apparently, according to Kathy O'Brien, something that the Nazis really perfected at NASA rather than at the CIA. As we saw in signals intelligence, NSA is the big dog in signals intelligence, and then CIA has its little Vault 7 and kind of does one of things. And it may be that CIA had a similar relationship with mind control. Now, there's multiple kinds of mind control. Folks are familiar with hypnosis. Now, you also have people who can have fractured minds and literally blank screens and stuff like that. And I'm not an expert, so I recommend people read Transformation of America or read my review of it, and read Tavistock and read my review of Weird Scenes in Laurel Canyon. And then you have mass media and mental manipulation. And I'm starting to get into something very, very interesting, which is sound manipulation.
Yes.
I'm going to put something in the next, you know how people know about subliminal suggestions in visuals. Well, it turns out that there are sound frequencies that can be used to control people and to influence people and to cause them to act insanely. And so there's an awful lot going on, and you and I have talked about 5G a little bit. There's an awful lot of evil that has been deeply rooted, in part because the intelligence community and the counterintelligence community have not done their jobs. They have been captured by the deep state. They have not been loyal to the deep state. And it's my prayer that Mike Flynn will get exonerated soon and will come back in and will help the president redirect the intelligence community back toward serving the American people rather than serving the deep state, which is what they do now.
Yeah, awesome. Well, and I know you got to go, so I'll have one more question. Talking about Q and the code red.
Let's go another 15 minutes since you've stabilized now. Let me push my other thing back. So let's go for 15 more minutes.
Awesome. When you mentioned Q, and I know there's a big thing about Red October and all the different things that can end up look like. I know they've talked about disclosure, Blue Beam. I was a part of Montauk, so I know some of the, I mean, there's so much, there's so much that's not like out there. And then when you do say anything, they either censor you or they, make you, anyway.
I'm evolving myself. I'm now totally into the possibility that we're all energy and we're migrating from negative energy to positive energy, and everything is frequencies. I'm a fan of Carrie Cassidy's, and I do believe that time and space travel is possible with the right frequency stuff. And of course, I have no direct knowledge, but as a professional who does a lot of reading, I'm seeing a lot of signals that some massive changes are going on that are far beyond the president, that are cosmic in nature. But I do believe that he is the chosen one for bringing order back to the United States of America.
Yeah, I agree with you. Do you think they're going to try to come up and make some weird blue beam type thing with UFOs just to distract?
Everything is possible. I just wrote an article that's been published in the Tehran Times, which is the only place I'm not censored. Okay. And I connected the dots from John F. Kennedy to 9/11. And I also connected false flag events. I ran a false flag for CIA. They're very real. I connected false flag events to Satanism and pedophilia. And people can I will be publishing the link to the article that has just been published in the Tehran Times on Friday. But the bottom line here is that the deep state assassinated John F. Kennedy, and the deep state did 9/11 as a mass sacrifice and as a pretext for war. And we know all of this. And what I am gradually coming to admire, and QAnon has certainly been helpful in that sense, is that somebody has spent a lot of time and energy very, very covertly preparing for a counter-revolution, for a counterattack against all of these deep state people. And what we're starting to see now is stuff that used to be covered up by the Senate Banking Committee, such as naked short selling, which is totally illegal, and money laundering, which is totally illegal. We're starting to see the articles coming out. It's almost like a drip, drip, drip. And I'm expecting to see a flood by 15 October. And in fact, John F. Kennedy Jr. is supposed to appear in Dallas on the 17th of October. I did an analysis of his death and concluded that the chances of his being alive are 80% or better.
Wow.
So I don't know. I'm just sitting here in the basement thinking and praying and hoping. But on balance, I think we're on a good path.
Yeah, and speaking of assassination, there's been several against Donald Trump, and whenever
I've seen.
How many?
14.
14. Wow.
I got to give the Secret Service credit, because Trump, my understanding, well, first off, the Secret Service betrayed John F. Kennedy, and hopefully they will never do that again. But my understanding is Trump has at least 3 layers of protection. The Secret Service, the New York Police Department, a special unit, and a special unit of the U.S. military. And I don't know anything about extraterrestrial matters, but supposedly he also has cosmic coverage. And I'd like to think that was true.
Yeah, I would like to think that's true too. Tell us a little bit about, you talked a little bit about 5G versus Tesla. Do you have any knowledge if they're really doing Tesla towers in some of these places to counteract and to turn the 5G into something positive?
Well, first off, 5G makes no sense from a simple physical point of view. Why are you putting towers up every 50 feet or whatever? That makes no sense at all. I think what we're actually moving into is a mass surveillance society in which every Amazon device, including your doorbell, is spying on you all the time. And we have to turn that back. Somewhere in the next 4 years, I would like an open source agency that also creates Web 3.0. And Web 3.0, among other things, should modulate the satellites We've had airliners go into quarantine because they thought the entire plane was infected with flu. It's actually radiation sickness. If you look up at Johns Hopkins, radiation sickness manifests exactly like COVID-19. And I think all the cruise ships were radiation sickness. They were all dealing with new, stronger satellite systems. Everybody was wearing a little internet connectivity wristband and so forth. So we're going to have to modulate the satellites, move to 6 or 7G, and supposedly there are ways to neutralize 5G. All connectivity to homes and offices should be in the ground with deep fiber. It makes no sense at all to use wireless when you can use fiber. And in fact, the Soviets, for the longest time, have had electromagnetic pollution standards 100 to 1,000 times more restrictive than we have. And the Soviets are way ahead of us in scalar warfare, gravitobiology, energetics, and I credit Thomas Bearden. Again, all of my knowledge is mostly indirect. Thomas Bearden has done some very good work in this. I don't think we're going to have another world war. We're having the war of our lifetime right now between the 99% and the 1%.
Yeah, I agree. And I have a lot of background in the whole frequency energy situation too.
I'm going to have to interview you. So let's set up a time for me to interview you.
Yes.
Just
and
keep going with your questions.
Yeah, no, and so talking about energy and Dew's HARP, you know, I'm in Louisiana right now. We've just had all this stuff in Florida when I was over there in the hurricane with that, the fires in California and Oregon. I know some of it is arson, which they don't want to say, but talk about Dew's and HARP and why would they use that?
I reviewed a number of books in this area, and my understanding right now is that HARP is the old, no longer used. They now have new, super improved ways of actually creating hurricanes and then controlling their path. And this last one, I did an interview with James McCanney, and he said this last hurricane wiped out 50% of the rice crop between Texas and Louisiana. And it was very clearly an attack on American food production. The fires, I think, are both being manually set and also being set by fire starters, which firefighters are authorized to use to create backfires. And I've seen videos of rays, and I don't know if that was photoshopped or whatever, but I find it very, very strange that fires stop at the Canadian border. I've never seen a fire recognize a border before. Or
houses and not trees.
You know, I've had a blessed life, and there are very few people that have the combination of experience that I do, including being a spy, having multiple graduate degrees, including the Naval War College, and then being a top nonfiction reviewer. And the more and more that I'm learning from what I think of as old knowledge, the more I realize I don't understand about new knowledge, which is this whole frequency, energy, consciousness thing. And I'm not an inherently spiritual person, but I am seeing with my own eyes and feeling with my heart that there are these massive light warriors, and somehow, and you are probably one of them, somehow they are changing things for the better.
Yes, and that's measurable by the Schumann resonance and some other things that we could talk about whenever you get
we'll set something up.
So last question, Gitmo, clones. You said you don't know too much about clones, body double.
Well, what I know just from reading is that it's possible to create clones. They've done it. I mean, they've cloned animals. I think they've also cloned humans. I would really like to see the president release the technology for growing new limbs. I'm told that we can grow new limbs for 75,000 veterans that are amputees from wars based on lies.
Yes.
So my fond dream is to see every veteran who's been blinded given their sight back. I think the technology's there. And I would like to see every veteran who's lost a limb have their limb grown back rather than giving them these claws that are so old. Gitmo has been ramped up. I mean, personally, if I were President Trump, I would give Gitmo back to Cuba, and I would stop treating Cuba as the enemy. In fact, Cuba is far ahead of the United States in healthcare. And I would like very much to see a joint Cuban-American initiative to basically dump scientific medicine, which is based on perpetuating disease, and go toward a new model for global health that is based on a healthy lifestyle, a healthy environment, natural and alternative cures, and as a very last resort, honest medicine, which we don't have today. In fact, Herman Cain was murdered in Georgia, at best by medical malpractice. Okay, at worst, he was murdered because he could have given the president Georgia. Now that makes Cynthia McKinney, who's in Georgia, much more valuable to the president, and his idiot staff is still not talking to her.
Yeah, that's the third leading cause of death, actually. They don't try to talk about it. But if Trump, like he wants to, can release or declassify all this Tesla stuff, it won't be that we need baby harvesting or human harvesting, but we could use these med beds, or we could clone arms or whatever. So I think you're onto something, and I really do hope that we can. I know he's changed a lot for pharma and in my industry, but it all works together. Every little bit is a piece that all connects together, including this energy piece. So tell us how we can connect with you, how our other people can connect with you. I know you got to run.
Thank you very, very much. I mean, Robert David Steele will bring up my website immediately, robertdavidsteele.com. And then I publish a number of free websites, 58iota.net and pedoempire.org is a book that's online free, and it also has a tag cloud so you can look up the names and you can see very clearly who's behind most of the pedophilia in the world. And then I have stopnakedshortselling.org and unrigged.net is a placeholder. But people can go to unrigged.net and see. I'm going to make sure after this video, I'm going to post this free online at unrigged.net. I'm going to do that right now, and then I'll go to my next meeting. Yes. So thank you very much, and I'll send you an email inviting you to interview so that I can learn from you and make that available to my audience. And I thank you very, very much for your nice thoughts.
Yes, sir. And I will post all of your links in this video as well so people can click really fast and find you. Thank you for your time. I know how busy you are, and you have an awesome day. I appreciate you so much.
Thank you, ma'am. Bye-bye.